Hi everyone, it's the EnglishSimmer here, and big thanks to EA for providing me with a limited time early access to The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature. This video is also tagged as ad gifted for that reason. I did get a limited time run to play the brand new expansion pack for free, but today's video is of course going to be my review. My can we replay? What elements of this pack work well for like future integration into The Sims? How does it work in other worlds with like other Sims who aren't like a fairy or aren't part of Inner Screen? This actually is interesting to me because obviously we've had a lot of occult packs that have been game packs in the past, specifically vampires, spellcasters, and werewolves, all which feel pretty similar to the way that fairies feel, but this is also a pack that feels very similar to Life and Death, even down to the world, but of course we will get into that. And of course, fairies are that little bit better than both aliens and mermaids. There's kind of a lot of comparison for us to do in this review. I'm also going to talk about like the missed opportunities that I personally think this pack kind of flopped a little bit on. I obviously only played with base game and the brand new pack, which was Enchanted by Nature, so this video isn't going to talk about cross compatibility unless I know about it. I will have a video going up hopefully on Sunday, fingers crossed, where I go over a bunch of the cross-pack compatibility that you lot have wanted to see, which I have a community post over on my community page right now. You can type in all the things that you want to see in that video. I'll link it in the description down below. Whilst I had fun with this pack, do I feel it expands The Sims 4? You know, it's an expansion pack. We should feel this expansion within the game. For the Create Sim, I think the masculine looks good, but I do think it falls short in range comparison when looked at against the feminine Sims. I think masculine Sims have been getting the short end of the stick recently, especially when it comes to them basically just taking like feminine assets and applying them to masculine, which I'm glad about. I'm glad they work on both frames. This pack actually worked the least in terms of like frame swapping when it comes to clothes. It faced a lot of the older issues that we used to have in Create a Sim, where angles and distortion happening, which doesn't happen very frequently when it comes to Create a Sim these days. But there are certain assets that they just pull from feminine and just like apply to masculine, and then they're like, yeah, that's fine. Like masculine have around the same amount, and it's like, yeah, but they weren't made for masculine Sims. Like you could have just made that feminine work on masculine and still given the masculine like fits their own vibe and like their own unique items. Kids need new unique hairs back. I know that it probably gives kids more hairstyles and more choice when they get adult size hairs just like resized to fit their own heads, but I miss kids feeling as if they get anything unique in packs. It's really starting to grind my gears. I would love it if they could give us all those size down ones that make sense for children and toddlers and infants, because we never get infant hairs anymore. But then they also gave us like one or two specifically that were made for those younger Sims. Create a Sim in general, Renfair core. There's a lot of like hunter-gathery. I know I've seen a lot of people in my comments saying, I wish that it felt like you could do like rebellious fairies or like dark fey creatures a little bit better. I also personally wish that they had added, I don't know, like a skin detail or something that added fur onto the legs of your Sims. They could have just used the texture from werewolves, but have it as one of those new like skin detail accessories with like the body sweat that they added, and actually had a fur pattern, because the hooves are just shoes and they're like ankle boots and they're really, really hard to make look good. Of course, I wish they gave us options that didn't have the leaves in it for that one hairstyle and a beard without the flowers for that one beard that we got. I know they're restricted on the number of assets that they can do, but I would have got rid of like a couple of the hats that didn't look as good on a Sim and changed that. Also, some people have been wanting to see a costume category added to Create a Sim. I don't really get that feedback. I know you want it for like costume parties, but I just use the extra party options. Every outfit already allows you to have 5 categories. Build and buy mode, I know I didn't do an overview of this. There are plenty of creators who focus on build build and buy mode and know like all the terminology and stuff more so than me. So I never really focus on that in a video, but it's very fantasy. There's a lot of like bringing the outdoors indoors. There's a lot of mushrooms and like wisteria growing. There's a lot of like leaf symbolism. If fantasy isn't your thing, if you don't want to build like hobbit homes, I don't think this build and buy is personally gonna be for you. The lighting elements are really, really sick. I just wish that they had updated the game so that you could change the color of lighting in build and buy mode instead of having to place down a light, go into live mode, change the color just to see how it like affects the light and the room. I think the townies are quite lovable. Like a few of them I am like, oh yeah, like I'm excited to interact with them. I think Glen Gnome is probably the most interesting. And I am excited for where players could potentially take their stories. However, there just wasn't enough in terms of relationship. The fact that Iris's parents didn't even know her and she didn't know her parents. A couple of people in my comment section have said when people go into the Fae realm, obviously time works differently in the Fae realm and they can start to forget. I don't mind if that was their reasoning for them not knowing each other, but like tell us that in the family bio. Like if you want that to be a story point and be their lore, give us that. But I don't personally think that was the inspiration. If it was the inspiration, developers, I am so sorry, but that should have been written in the bio because I would have loved that element a lot more and I wouldn't have just thought it was like you missed the chance for them to know each other. I think there are a good range of lot sizes in Innisgreen. I definitely would have preferred more of a challenge to be able to reach Everdew. I gave the same feedback when it came to life and death. I wish that the ghost realm wasn't so easily accessible. I wish that the fairy neighborhood wasn't as accessible. I wish you either had to go through a portal, use the teleportation stone, whatever it may be to actually uncover Everdew. I wish that maybe they gave you like the power of wings if you went through this portal and that's how you got access to entering Everdew. Even if you were a human, just like having wings for like the day. Then if you start making trouble, they could have given that away. The court could have stripped those wings back off you and you would have had reduced access, maybe get kicked out. Maybe you would have just had to have worn a costume with like fake wings on the back of it to gain access to Everdew to try and like trick the fairies into thinking that you are one of them. The 3 neighborhoods that we got do feel smaller than what we have had recently, but I'm actually a fan of that. I know that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I prefer it when the neighborhoods are smaller so that it actually feels as if there are Sims walking around. One of my biggest feedbacks for Tomarang was that the neighborhoods were too expansive and you barely see a soul like interacting in the night market, etc. This time around, I did feel like there was a lot of townies spawning and you could actually interact with like a bunch of plant sims, fairies, and also human sims. The second-hand bookstore is kind of completely useless. It's a fun way to donate books. You don't get anything for donating books. You don't get any type of a reward. You don't get paid monetarily, and you also don't like receive anything in your inventory. Would have liked to see maybe a little bit given to be like, yeah, this is why you should donate books. Maybe it just like increases your luck for that day, but the discount is useless. It's barely discounted. You can collect fables, which basically work like Finchwick favors. They kind of send you on a little story quest to do. I wish that there were specific bartenders in either the lounge or the bar that we got in this pack, and I wish that they were like high fantasy, like fae creatures. I wish that they had added some like tieflings, ogres, fauns, etc. Bartenders know everything in fantasy realms, so I found it a little bit strange that they hadn't given you like NPC bartenders that you could interact with that would be like, yeah, so I heard this rumor of like this story, like you should go and unfold it, because we all know that they are in everybody's business. All in all, I think Everdew is my favorite neighborhood, followed by Spruce Derry, followed by Coast of Admore. I think Coast of Admore just is a little bit boring and there's really not that much to do. I'm gonna start off with the new systems because I feel like that's really where I don't know if I would classify it as like fear-mongering, but there are a lot of rumors about these new systems and how luck doesn't affect anyone outside of the new world, which is not the truth whatsoever. I'm talking specifically of the balance system and the luck system work in all worlds. Trust me, I would be fuming with this pack if those two systems introduced were only available in Innisgreen. Don't get me wrong, I think obviously when of course, I was playing with base game and this pack installed, I was seeing them kind of more frequently because I was doing a lot of interactions that is affected by luck. But the thing is, both of those systems I fear are going to fade into the background. Obviously, we have so many systems within the game, and I want to say these two are the most comparable to kind of, I guess, the systems that came with Lovestruck, where you know that they're working behind the scenes, but a lot of the time when you're just like playing through days, you don't really notice them at all, because luck can affect anything from the quality of items that your Sims can craft or cook. That can be increased if you have good luck. It can obviously be decreased if you have bad luck. It can also affect the rarity of like the collectibles you can find or forage and the number of items that you can find or forage. So obviously, again, if you have good luck, you're going to get more items of rarer quality. Bad luck, less items, less luck in finding things. Whereas with the balance system, this is one that fades into the background a lot, like way more than luck even, because when you are doing those interactions, you'll get a little notification about your luck that's like, this sim thinks that their luck is affecting the way that this item turned out or the items that they found. So you kind of get reminded that the luck system is working, whereas for the balance system, if you're in a good balance, if you're all the way at green at the end of that spectrum and you have a good balance, you don't really notice anything. There's not really any difference to your game or your Sims whatsoever. Once they become imbalanced is when you will actually get a notification that's like, hey, your Sim is feeling balanced, here are the effects. Now, feeling imbalanced can actually speed up your need decay, so your needs will go down at an accelerated rate. Your skills will also not gain as quickly, and then when you get to very imbalanced, your Sim will from the get-go automatically acquire an ailment. So I guess being imbalanced is actually my favorite part of the balance system. Can have a knock-on effect on your Sims, and it affects stuff outside of the pack. Like obviously it's not the new skills that are only affected and it is your needs. Ailments are annoying anyway, and of course we'll get into that. And I think just like having that being the repercussion for being very imbalanced is a little lackluster, because you can cure those ailments very, very quickly. A lot of the time you won't even really notice like the ailments effect rather than the rash on your Sim's skin. I am kind of hoping that having good luck can like raise your chances of winning the lottery in seasons, because that's something that I've never done. I want to make a whole video when I do have my hands on all of the packs, like actually paying attention to the luck and kind of doing a deep dive on this system. I think if you're just living your Sim's life on the regular, like daily going about working and looking after children, etc., you're not really gonna notice these things. I think maybe if you're doing a Rex to Riches or an all collections challenge where, you know, it depends very heavily on you finding assets out in the world, or you're trying to make the most amount of money in craftables, that is where you are gonna notice the luck element. Speaking of it affecting the whole game, natural living also is available in every world. The natural living skill is not only tied to inner screen. You can literally sleep anywhere on the ground from the get-go. You don't even need the natural living skill. Now, foraging is limited to the ground that you are on, so just keep that in mind. Obviously, gonna be a little bit more difficult in somewhere like San Myshuno, which has a lot of concrete around, because Sims can't dig in concrete. Even when you paint terrain tools and you use like a cobblestone or stones to make pathways, Sims will not be able to forage on that terrain. Of course, this does add a kind of, I guess, new-ish element of gameplay, but I think honestly the opinions that I had about this even before I got my hands on this pack did follow through to me playing through this pack, and I still do think that we could already do a majority of these things. Some of them, yes, were introduced in other packs. So if you don't have those other packs, this natural living skill is probably going to be quite enjoyable for you. If you don't mind taking the challenge out of like a rags to riches, because it really does make stuff easier. I personally am not probably going to use this too much in rags to riches because I just think it takes the fun out of it. It takes the challenge out of it and it makes it a much easier and smoother experience for your Sims, even though you still do have to like level up that skill to make things progress quicker. If you have werewolves, it does eradicate, or I guess it doesn't eradicate because you have to have these powers whilst you're a werewolf, but a lot of the like tier 1 ranking of werewolf powers are powers that will now be available to any Sims if they work on their natural living skill. Obviously, you could still choose to be a werewolf, you can still choose to put your ability points into them, or you can just skip over them if you have started to work on your natural living skill. So those are scavenge, which obviously you can find food while scavenging, and then you can chow down on like raw fish that you have. Marking territory. Now Sims, when they reach level 2 of the natural living skill, they can just summon a privy bush, which I do like the animation for that. However, it is just the same animation as marking your territory as a werewolf. It's just a little bush grows up from the ground and they like squat into it, and then they, you know, do their business. And then of course wolves could have like a wolf nap where they curled up on the floor and they could just go to sleep, and that is the same animation that they use for sleeping on the floor. It's also the same animation for like toddlers when they curl up and go to sleep. You could obviously already sleep outside. It is a little bit different because now you can sleep through the night. You can actually select to sleep and your Sim will sleep for the period of time the same way they do in beds, whereas on benches in base game you could only ever nap. Natural living also does give a little buff to napping on benches, and I think Sims may sleep for longer. If you have sleeping bags from Growing Together or Horse Ranch, again, you could just drag that out of your inventory and sleep like off lot anywhere in the world. If you had Outdoor Retreat or Snowy Escape, you already have tents, which again, same premise. If you swim in open water, your hygiene need does actually increase. It is extremely slow. I think it's actually still a little bit slower than when you first start to like bathe in open water using the natural living, even though that is also slow. However, you could also up your hygiene by showering in the waterfall if you have island living, and you could, if you had seasons and it was raining, shower in the rain. Obviously, you could cook on barbecues or campfires that are dotted around the world. You could also just use like other food that Sims have created on those barbecues and eat that. And you could also harvest anything that existed in the world and eat those. Obviously, again, with the natural living, it has added the addition of the more you gain this natural living skill, obviously, when you start to eat harvestables, it can fill your hunger up more and more. But I found that the raw stuff, like the raw frogs and the raw fish, didn't actually even fill my needs hunger all that much. So it just kind of gives you an optional way to do things that we've already done. I really, really wish that they had given toddlers the option to sleep on the ground, because they already have that animation. When they're feeling really, really tired, they can just go for a nap, but they can't sleep on the ground. What if you want to have a whole family that can live like off lot, or never like build them a home and just have them basically live off the land? I just think that should have been an option and could have been so easy for them to do. Children thankfully can work on their natural living skills, so they can sleep anyway, and infants already have the option to be like placed on the floor and go to sleep, to kind of make this at least feel a little bit unique. I wish they had given us a way to wash plates. That way, even if you did want to use like food that people brought over in the welcome wagon, or you wanted to use that food that people were making on barbecues, you would have a way to actually wash your plates or clean your plates without either having to drag them over to a bin, which fair enough, I guess you could just put a bin on your lot and be done with plates that way, which they are looking into that bug, which I don't know, maybe it felt like they were trying to do something with with off the lot living and plates gathering, and then they were just like, let's just leave it as bins, and then something went wrong. We already have a tub in laundry day stuff. I wouldn't have even minded if they'd use something similar to that, or like a little bucket that you could go and gather water, because you can already gather water from ponds, and then just be able to wash your plates in that. I think it would have added a little bit more realism. I think it takes away the need for needing like a sink or plumbing. Even just being able to wash plates in open water. Like, you can bathe yourself. Why can't you just like take plates that you may have like in your inventory or something and wash those in the open water? If you have those other packs and you're like, I'm buying this for the natural living skill, I wouldn't say that you should buy it for the natural living skill. I also wanted to talk about the Apothecary skill. This mainly cures ailments, so it is mainly used for the new pack. There are a couple of like potions and things that you can craft that help outside of curing ailments. You can make some items that make your look worse or better. A couple of them give you like happiness, but we already have some things like that in the base game reward store that you can get that can actually like change your mood, such as the emotion potions, or they can fill certain needs for you. Most of them either affect your moodlets or your needs or your look, which in my opinion isn't super interesting gameplay. It just feels a little bit cheaty to be like, oh, I don't want to suffer from this moodlet anymore, so let me just get rid of it. I don't think there's going to be any overlap between Sims feeling sick from Get to Work and the Apothecary system, because you can already go to the doctors. And personally, I don't know if I would want Apothecary to like take away from that, although I do think it would be cool instead of just like taking any form of medicine, you could not trust like big pharma, and instead you could go to like the apothecary stall in the new world. The job obviously you can do anywhere. We have the new naturopath career. If you're living in any world, any Sims can visit you if you choose at level 2 to have a client visit your home. I definitely would have preferred it if you had a choice of like how many clients visited. I kind of wish that it wasn't just like a one and done situation. Basically, if you do choose to have someone come for a home visit, you will only have one customer that day. It just automatically finishes. I like the option that Sims can come over. I think that is a great thing. I think that opens the doors for a lot of future careers. I think we definitely could have like a modeling career. I kind of wish they had added this to like the stylist, so that people could come over and you could actually like restyle them using a mirror or something like that. I really wish that they had honestly just done this for Lovestruck with the therapy career. It is slightly annoying the way that Sims just like walk around your house. I kind of wish that if you did have like an apothecary office, they would just like sit down and talk to you. They will do everything you find annoying currently about your Sims, and you do have to chase them around your house. However, I do think this job can get quite repetitive. It's basically the same system as Get to Work and Jungle Adventure, where you basically like run tests, you diagnose something, like the vets as well. The more tests you run, obviously the less options you have to choose from when you actually do diagnose a Sim. However, if you are playing this and you're also just seeing like ailments around the world, your Sim are contracting ailments, you will get used to what the rashes on your Sim skin means, and you'll just be able to diagnose them super easily. I don't think there's like too much replay value. I think from the apothecary, there's probably going to be more replay value in actually selling like your emotion potions in businesses and hobbies or Get to Work, running like an apothecary shop where you can sell cures and elixirs, more so than like the job and the skill itself. Ailments, in my opinion, and I don't know whether this was just because I was playing again with base game and the pack installed, and therefore you obviously do see these things happen more frequently. They were happening a bit too often. I do think probably the more you interact with Enchanted by Nature, the more ailments you are going to see, which is again why I think I had that knock-on effect of it feeling like every single townie at one point was infected with an ailment. Speaking of, townies do get infected with them. You will see townies around your worlds with ailments. I looked in the pack settings, there wasn't an option to disable ailments, so I'm kind of hoping it does work in that way, where if maybe you just don't interact with this element of Enchanted by Nature, you won't see it as much, kind of like interacting with Get to Work and Aliens. However, I do enjoy that ailments do have like a positive and a negative effect. For example, with the Greenie Meanie, you will gain the gardening skill at an accelerated rate. However, it does mean that you are more mean to Sims and you're in an angry moodlet a lot of the time. Fables and Townies, I mean, if you've played Cottage Living and you do the Finchwick favors, it's pretty much the same system. They are a bunch of like fetch quests that you can do for Sims, and it will give you like lore. But once you've kind of done them, you've done them. Like, you know how to do those fables. They're also extremely easy. The one that stands out is like the riddle one that Spruce Almighty can give you. It feels like you should be able to give an incorrect answer to the mushrooms when they offer you riddles, but you can't. I just wish there was more difficulty. A lot of things feel extremely easy in this pack. Even like becoming a fairy is very, very simple. The only like replay value or like repeatable value you're gonna get when it comes to fables lies in the rewards. If you need a certain reward from a fable, you can repeat them, which, by the way, if you go to your Sims notebook, there is a whole category tied to like inner screen and interactions that you can do within inner screen. That's where tales will be written, and also if you have completed fables, the fables will be written in there. So if you want to like reread the story, just go to your notebook. You don't need to do the whole fable again. Also, a really nice way to check if you have done a fable. I am a fan of the changes to the notebook. I think that is really, really cool. The lightning route is really good for those of you who choose to live off the grid. This can actually connect to your power grids, which will help you with your bills. I didn't actually test it out with off the grid, but I'm fairly sure if you have one of these, you will actually generate electrical power off it, which is really, really nice. That's a really cool feature. I was not expecting that. That's one of those features that the team kind of think of that I wouldn't have thought of as a player. And I guess it is like kind of a little bit cross-compatible because it's going to help with like those of you who enjoy eco lifestyle. Moving on more so to fairies. I've already kind of spoken about how easy it is to become a fairy. There's not really any challenge to this whatsoever. However, I will say if you do want to make it a challenge, you have to basically research about like how to become a fairy. They'll tell you that you need a fairy seedling. Try and get a fairy seedling through foraging if you want to make this quest like last longer. That is the only way that I have added difficulty to becoming a fairy, because I was already a natural skill level 7 by the time I found one. I think it's a little bit dependent on luck, so if you're having good luck, you might find it faster than I did, but it did take a solid 3 days. Whereas if you just find a fairy and ask them for one, you can do that so easily just by like traveling to Everdew or like knowing a couple of the townies that are fairies. You can just buy one on the computer for like 1,500. But once you've actually got that, Mother Nature will give you a potion. You drink that potion, you have 24 hours to go into the pond and turn yourself into a fairy, which I feel like even turning into a werewolf is more difficult than that. Obviously, you can ask to be bitten from a werewolf, but if you want to naturally become a werewolf, I guess, you have to wait until there is a full moon to go and swim in the lake, and then once you do that, you will become a werewolf. So at least it has like that time frame on it, and it kind of gives you a block of becoming a fairy. Realm of Magic, again, you actually have to go to the magic realm and you have to look for those moats, even though it's super easy to find those moats. At least it was a little bit more interactive. I wish there was a way that you could become a fairy in a harder circumstance. When it comes to fairy powers, I know I did that video where I did a tier ranking of the fairy powers, which kind of goes more in depth into how I feel about all of them. I think the most helpful and the most like replayability from these comes from insight, which is obviously just getting to know things about other Sims, such as their likes and dislikes, their career, etc. If you don't want to waste time getting to know a Sim, you can just run insight, which I always quite like it when you can just get to know another sim like that and kind of use it for your own storytelling. Insta age, obviously you can instantly age up sims, which kind of takes out the waiting of having to bake a cake and have sims blow out candles. Specifically helpful if you have like triplets who are all fighting to take a piece of cake, but you also want to keep on the candles. It's a little bit cheaty, which I know I always say, like, I wish magic in the game wasn't so cheaty, but it's like a cheat that saves time, you know? It's not just like, oh, let me change the mood of a sim. Obviously, influencing relationships and sentiments, I do think this is what can allow you to kind of cause that chaos and cause some drama. You can do that for either your own sim and how people think about you, or you can do it for other sims and how they interact with other sims, which I love. You can kind of play matchmaker because you can deplete or increase their romantic relationships as well as friendly ones. Personally gonna get a lot of use out of that, and I think that does expand the game. I think that allows for like creative storytelling. Spawning uncommon or rare seeds kind of takes a little bit of difficulty out of, I guess, having to get up your gardening skill, but does give you a way to be able to spawn those seeds if you don't want to like purchase them and spend like thousands of simoleons. And also obviously growth, eruption, and bloom. I really wanted something like this where it could actually help with plants. I wish that there was a grafting one. I wish that you could actually have a very high costing spell that maybe you could only do like once a week, which I do kind of wish that there were bigger cooldowns on the spells. I wish that they weren't only available like depending on your emotional force, because you could do a very high costing one, go regenerate your emotional force at a fairy house, come back and just do that same spell over and over again, like as many times as you want. I guess enchanting or bringing a gnome to life is also quite helpful for gardening specifically, because again, they can gift you with rare seeds. Again, feels a little bit cheaty. You might not want to use it, but some replay value there for those of you who are fussed about collections or are looking for something specific. I do, however, for the fairy powers, miss the mischief. Even though obviously you can influence like relationships and stuff, I don't feel like they got the mischief of fairies like as good as it was in The Sims 3. Even though Sims 3 fairies were very, very limited, I played with them recently. I definitely think The Sims 4 fairies are better in like the amount of things that you can do and the amount of like gameplay they have and like influence they have. I do still wish that they had taken some of those cosmetic like mischievous interactions and added them into the game as well. I also think it brings in some humor that like The Sims 2 had that sometimes I feel The Sims 4 severely misses out on. Natural beauty was kind of like that in The Sims 3. You changed the way a sim looks. If they changed their ways and did like nice interactions, they would go back to how they regularly looked. Whereas if they continued doing like mean interactions, they were forced to stay the way that your fairy made them. Messing up their hair or makeup, I mean, giving them like clown makeup, making them embarrassed or sad, even though that does just affect moodlets, I do think it could also affect like interactions that sim is able to do, and therefore have like a knock-on effect on their relationships without you physically like influencing their relationships. Put them into a trance. Obviously, I know that we have that with vampires. I wouldn't have minded seeing that like reused for fairies and having them like do your bidding or affecting their relationships in that way, rather than just it kind of being like, oh yeah, let's decrease their relationship and then that relationship just decreasing in their panel. Like, I wish that you actually saw sims like interacting with each other. I did look up like some tricks that fae creatures could play in like folklore. Someone mentioned changing children to changelings and those changelings like causing mischief, which I don't think I want to go as far to like stealing a kid away from their family and giving them a changeling instead, but I do think we could have had more of an influence again on sims, especially children, and make them mischievous. So they make messes more frequently, they like listen to loud music, they argue and do mean interactions more often, giving that like I'm influencing you, but I can actually see that play out in my gameplay rather than just seeing a negative change in your relationship on screen. Give them wind where they again become like embarrassed and everyone like kind of looks at them and is like, oh, we're not gonna go talk to them. Steal teeth, tooth fairy, you know, there's a connection for you. You could have like stole a Sim's teeth and for a day they could just have the black hole that we are used to seeing on like the Grim Reaper before he got his glow up. For darker magic, I really wish that you could age up elders. You can't do that. Even if you have the age up power, if they're an elder, they're just like, you can't age this Sim up anymore, which I want to cause an early demise. I wish that you could maybe get to know like thoughts about your Sim. Like maybe if they were having trouble in their romantic relationship, they could think like, oh, am I gonna like break up with this person or not? Like, do I want to get married to this person or do I not? And then you could blackmail that Sim. I know technically we do have blackmail in For Rent, but it's not very good. It just gives you a couple of simoleons. We don't have a gossip system, which that could have been cool to add in a pack like this, so that the social interactions that you did actually did make it around town. Or you can make oaths with fairies where they kind of feel like they own your soul unless you give them like gifts every day, or if your gift wasn't up to the standard that they wanted it to be, they could like smite you, they could like put you in bad luck for like a week long. Speaking of, you can have problem fairies. If you get caught using fairy magic in the coast of Admore, you get a warning, and then the second time you do it, you get a trait that calls you a problem fairy, and you have to go to the fairy hub to kind of like appeal. Sometimes I think you will have to pay to have that removed. My Sim apparently charmed them, so didn't have to pay. But the only negative about becoming a problem fairy is the fact that you get your fairy dust ration taken away from you. Wish that there was more of a punishment, more of a consequence for problem fairies. If we had a gossip system, kind of like Puck in The Sims 3. Apparently that dude was hated because he stole a child, or there was something to do with his child, and people are like, we don't like Puck, he's a weird dude. And I was playing Supernatural recently and I was like, why does everyone hate Puck? And then someone told me that. I was like, you know what, valid of them to dislike this man. And that kind of plays on the Fae lore. I wish maybe you were restricted to like not using your fairy powers for like 3 days or a week to remind you like, hey, you're a fairy, you should be following the rules that the court has set up. Or if you were a repeat offender and you became a troublesome fairy like more than 3 times, your fairy status was actually taken from you and you were made to be a human Sim. Like that would be so cool if there were consequences like that. Kind of like werewolves and the packs. If you don't participate in like what the packs want you to do, you have a chance of getting kicked out of the packs. And I wish that the fairy court played more of a role. The fairy court actually plays like no role whatsoever apart from you being a troublesome fairy. I wish that there was more division, like commitment to the different courts. I think it could have been a fun like educational thing. I just think the court was lacking so much, and they could have had so much cool lore to work from when it comes to like Fae creatures and the Fae realm. Oh, I do wish that fairy kids got a little bit more. When my toddler actually aged up, they were angry and they were kind of having an outburst because fairies feel emotions. I did get a notification that was like a teen or elder can like teach them how to overcome this, and I don't think that's gonna have any effect on emotional control once they do age up, but I will have a look at that in my cross-pack gameplay. I wish that it would have an effect on emotional control. Maybe if they did overcome it whilst being a toddler fairy, then their emotional control would always be in the green. And I wish that kids could like learn to fly on training wings. Each of the younger Sims does have like an outfit with fake fairy wings, but I wish that children specifically could put on like a pair of training wings and they could like learn to fly. Even though flying is open to like every fairy from the get-go and you don't need to like practice it, I just think it would be a cute little animation even if it doesn't really have like a knock-on effect. I wish that when like younger fairies sneezed, they accidentally did like an ability. Like imagine if they were out in the garden and they like accidentally sneezed and then all the plants like bloomed around them. It would be so cute. So whilst I do think this pack in general does expand on the game, do I think it should be an expansion pack? It's tough because I think it adds more in general than like werewolves, for example, in the sense of, you know, those kind of bigger things like the world is bigger, and obviously we have a job where we didn't in werewolves, and we do have 2 new skills. But at the end of the day, natural living kind of just reuses stuff that we could already do. I personally think I would have preferred fairies as a game pack. I would have been happy with just like Everdew as the world, and I would have preferred it to maybe have the focus be on the court system, have it play out a little bit more like werewolves, but then people might have complained that it was just a reskin of werewolves but fairies this time around. I personally think it's a little bit of a reskin of Life and Death. I said this in my world overview, but it feels extremely similar to the Life and Death world, in which you kind of have this like occult thing in like the top left corner, and then you have these 2 other like districts that I guess kind of have like a couple of things that you can do around them, but it's kind of more about like reading about lore. And it feels harsh to say that because I do also quite like some of the stuff. I like the look system, even though it's not like the biggest thing that you will notice. I do like the natural living. I just probably won't choose to play with it all that often. I obviously think there's replayability. If you are an occult player, I think you're going to enjoy fairies. If you are a rags to riches player who is looking forward to like unlocking these things in the natural living skill, obviously you're going to get replay value out of this pack. I think for me, the biggest issue is things just felt like they weren't really pushed far enough, or they would introduce something cool and then I wish that they would run with it a little bit more, and they were probably honestly restricted by the fact that there were already like these little things that they also wanted to put in. I genuinely would have preferred houseplants to just come as a kit, which I know absolutely wild, but they could have been a gameplay kit. Like, I'm sorry, they easily could have been a like build buy mode kit. We already have like the greenhouse kit and the blooming rooms kit. Those could have easily been a houseplant kit where you get to water houseplants and houseplants can die, because there's not even like loads of new houseplants and they're just like a little thing. I didn't even talk about houseplants in this video because that's how like minuscule they are. Maybe it's the case of being the same as Horse Ranch, where they needed the money and the budget of an expansion for the animations, which wouldn't surprise me because the fairy animations are great. I love the way the fairies look when they're sized down. I love that they look like the Sims. However, if you have given me the option on a brainstorming idea and been like, would you like fairies to look like they did in The Sims 3, where they were just a ball of light, you couldn't really see them in their small form, but have this a game pack so it's not eating into our animation budget, and have more to do with like fairies and like the Fey realm and the court system, kind of like packs in werewolves? Or would you prefer this as an expansion where you can see the fairies and they are themselves even in their small down version and they look great, but you also have to have like all of kind of this other stuff crammed into it, which makes it feel like it's slightly more of like a bigger pack, but in reality we don't go that deep into a lot of things. I would have 9 times out of 10 chosen to have fairies a ball of light and have it as a game pack over having this as an expansion pack. But of course, as always, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. I think a lot of people seem to be feeling the same way that I do, just from the conversations that I've been seeing online, but I would love to hear what you lot think of it. Is there any like big missed opportunities, anything that I may have mentioned in this video, or something else that you have personally thought of that you think could have gone down really well in this pack? I would love to hear it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, thank you to EA for providing me with early access so that I could get all of these videos up for you. And the next time I see you, I'm gonna have this installed with all my other packs, so we're gonna be able to do even more deep dives, which I'm excited for. I appreciate you all so much, and I will speak to you all in my next one. Bye now.